As the prison gates creaked open, I felt no surge of liberation. Instead, I heard whispers of something ominous, a truth that should have remained buried. The crunch of my boots against the gravel echoed in the stillness, while the air carried a peculiar blend of petrichor and oxidized metal. After spending 6 years imprisoned for someone else's crime, I expected elation upon my release. Yet here I stood on this desolate road, my instincts screaming that something wasn't right. Terribly not right. Hey, before I delve into this serpentine narrative, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Give me a quick hello in the comments. Perhaps you're nestled in a bustling Seattle cafe or lounging in your backyard down in Florida. Whatever corner of the world you're in, I'm thankful for your company. And if this tale captures your imagination, don't forget to subscribe for more. Believe me, the journey ahead is worth every minute. Now, returning to that fateful moment. I hadn't even counted a dozen steps when it occurred. A menacing black pickup, license plates conspicuously absent, materialized like a phantom, its engine howling with murderous intent. It charged straight at me, leaving clouds of dust in its wake. Pure survival instinct kicked in. I lunged sideways, crashing into the rain-soaked ditch as the vehicle swerved violently before disappearing. Lying there, my heart thundering in my chest, I gazed at the overcast sky, pondering who would want me silenced before I could even savor my newfound freedom. Was this a cautionary message? A case of mistaken identity? Or perhaps the opening move in a game I had yet to comprehend? Struggling to my feet and dusting off my jacket, I noticed a figure emerging from the roadside shadows. He was lean, sporting a weathered Mariners baseball cap that obscured his features. Without much conversation, he tossed me a keyring and gestured toward a worn SUV parked nearby. Mentioned it was arranged by Tanner, my loyal friend and attorney, who'd relentlessly fought for my release. The mysterious messenger also handed over an envelope filled with cash and directions to an apartment in Tacoma. Then he vanished into the misty air as suddenly as he'd appeared. I didn't hesitate. I slipped behind the wheel, started the engine, and accelerated away. The media vultures would be circling soon, and I had no intention of becoming their story. The highway unfurled before me like a glistening serpent, slicing through dense pine forests and swirling mist. I divided my attention between the slick asphalt and the rearview mirror where something caught my eye. A pristine white Honda maintained a consistent distance, several vehicles behind. Its unwavering presence felt deliberate, calculated. My grip tightened around the steering wheel, knuckles whitening. Those 6 years behind bars had honed my survival instincts to razor sharpness, and right now, they were blaring like sirens. Testing my suspicions, I veered into a nearby gas station, positioning my SUV by the fuel pumps. As anticipated, the Honda glided in moments later, parking with practiced precision near the store. Its driver emerged, a woman in her mid-30s with penetrating eyes and dark hair gathered in a disheveled bun. She carried herself differently from law enforcement or press. She moved like someone harboring dangerous knowledge. She approached with measured confidence, settling against my vehicle before introducing herself as Lila Hensley, an independent journalist investigating my case. She explained that her late father, a private investigator, had always believed in my innocence, and she'd inherited his mission. Lila was refreshingly direct, revealing her discovery of suspicious connections between the insurance company that had profited from the murder and suggesting an elaborate setup. Though her voice remained steady, her vigilant glances toward the road betrayed underlying tension. Trust didn't come easily to me anymore, but something in her demeanor commanded attention. She prompted me to search my memories for potential adversaries, anyone who might have orchestrated my imprisonment. The question almost drew bitter laughter. 6 years ago, I was simply Mason Carver, leading an unremarkable life in software engineering, sharing it with my wife Serena and a child whose absence now haunts my every moment. Enemies seemed implausible then, but Lila persisted, revealing her investigation had uncovered links between my former employer and a competing corporation headed by Victor Grayson. Though unfamiliar, the name carried weight in her voice, dripping with unspoken implications. I requested time to digest this information and contemplate my next steps. She agreed, leaving her contact details before departing. As her taillights disappeared into the distance, I remained stationary, engine humming, her revelations echoing in my mind. Someone had orchestrated the theft of 6 years from my life. Someone had attempted to permanently silence me today. Now armed with a name, a lead, and mounting suspicion that the truth lurked nearby, I pulled away from the station, the road ahead dissolving into uncertainty. One thing remained crystal clear. This was merely the beginning of a dangerous journey. The downpour persisted as I entered Tacoma, my tires whispering against the rain-slicked pavement. Following the address from the envelope, I located a modest apartment complex nestled behind a string of seedy bars and pawnbrokers. The building's atmosphere was heavy with the scent of wet concrete and stale tobacco. But after spending 6 years surrounded by prison walls, I welcomed any shelter. I dragged myself up the stairwell, still processing Lila's revelation about Victor Grayson. An unfamiliar name somehow entangled with my shattered past. My fist barely grazed the door when it swung wide. There stood Tanner Voss, his imposing 6'2" frame more weathered than I recalled. His once neat beard had grown wild, and his gaze held a newfound intensity, as if life had dealt him some harsh lessons since our last encounter. He'd been my defense attorney when everything crumbled, the sole voice insisting I hadn't murdered that executive. These days, he owned a rusty anchor, trading courtroom drama for bartending, a change that seemed to suit him. His greeting was a forceful shoulder clasp that made me flinch before he ushered me inside. The apartment was minimally furnished. A worn couch, basic coffee table, and an ancient television set. Despite the lingering sense of leather and beer, it felt like sanctuary. Tanner bypassed pleasantries, directed me to sit while he retrieved beers and dove straight into business. The news hit hard. Serena had disappeared. My former wife had liquidated our Seattle property, emptied our joint accounts, and vanished with Caleb. My heart constricted painfully. My son would be 10 now, a child I hadn't glimpsed since his toddler years, all thanks to her actions. I slammed my beer down, sending foam cascading, demanding their whereabouts. Tanner's expression was grim as he explained her methodical disappearance. No trace remained. No address, contact information, nothing. Just an abandoned rental apartment and a cold trail. He suspected the restraining order she'd secured post-conviction motivated her actions, fearing my potential pursuit. Fear? After her betrayal? I insisted he locate Caleb, regardless of cost. His agreement came with a warning to maintain a low profile. The truck that nearly ended me earlier wasn't coincidental. Someone wanted my silence preserved. Sleep eluded me that night. Every creak of the ancient couch and distant car horn sent adrenaline coursing through my veins, my body anticipating another assault. By dawn, my temples throbbed mercilessly, a combination of excessive beer and unanswered questions clouding my mind. That's when the door swung open, revealing Kira Delaney. A bartender from Tanner's establishment. She was 29, sporting an untamed cascade of copper hair and wearing an expression that broadcast her take-no-prisoners attitude. She strode in carrying breakfast, coffee, and grease-stained donuts, setting them down with casual familiarity before instructing me to eat. Though she claimed Tanner had sent her a check on me, her lingering presence suggested personal motives. Kira settled beside me on the couch, close enough that her drugstore perfume, sweet and inexpensive, wafted between us. Words tumbled from her lips with practiced ease, as though we were old friends catching up. She shared her history at the Rusty Anchor, years spent serving drinks while deflecting unwanted advances from intoxicated patrons. Then she dropped the bomb. She remembered Serena frequenting the bar before my trial, hanging on to some man who wasn't me. My coffee cup froze midway to my mouth as she described him. Tall, meticulously groomed, sporting an expensive timepiece, the type who flashed cash through extravagant tips. Though unfamiliar, the description aligned perfectly with Lila's mentions of Victor Grayson. Kira leaned closer, her voice hushed, confessing she'd never believed I was capable of murder. Said her years of experience had taught her to spot liars, and I wasn't one. Words failed me, lodging painfully in my throat. After 6 years behind bars, this stranger's faith in my innocence felt surreal when half the world had condemned me. She must have read the emotion in my expression because she shifted nearer, her fingers ghosting along my arm. She spoke of my ordeal, suggesting perhaps fate owed me some kindness. The next moment, her lips found mine in a bold, unabashed kiss that I couldn't bring myself to resist. After years of isolation and cold steel, her warmth intoxicated me. Conversation ceased as we surrendered to the moment, raw and imperfect but undeniably real. When it ended, she remained sprawled across the couch, her smile radiating triumph. Like she'd conquered a personal battle. She confided about her own experience with infidelity, how her ex-partner's betrayal had led her to embrace life with renewed vigor and independence. With a knowing glance, she admitted to accepting the position at Tanner's establishment, fully aware of my identity, believing I needed someone to help me rediscover life's rhythms. I found myself laughing genuinely for the first time in years, the sound foreign yet liberating. However, beneath this moment of levity, my thoughts continued their relentless churning. Serena, Caleb, Victor. While Kira represented an unexpected lifeline, Tanner's revelations about my family blazed like an unquenchable inferno in my mind. The need to locate them, to understand their motives, consumed me. Instinctively, I recognized this was merely the opening chapter. Morning arrived languidly, with rays of light penetrating the weathered blinds of my Tacoma residence. Still entangled in bedsheets, with Kira's fragrance clinging to the pillowcase, a commanding knock startled me to consciousness. My skull pounded from the previous night's beer and the burden of Tanner's disclosures about Serena and Caleb. I shuffled toward the entrance, half expecting Tanner with updates, only to find Lila Hensley standing there, her ebony hair glistening with Seattle's perpetual drizzle. She entered without invitation, clutching a folder and emanating an air of significant discovery. The atmosphere grew dense with anticipation. The apartment retained traces of Kira's visit, coffee and donut aromas lingering in the air, but Lila remained standing. She traversed my modest living space, her footwear marking paths on the aged carpeting, warning me to prepare myself. She explained her night spent excavating through her father's archived files, pursuing leads related to my case. The folder landed forcefully on the coffee table, its contents scattering, as she indicated a pixelated photograph. There was Serena, my Serena, intimately linked arm in arm with a stranger in an upscale Seattle establishment. The man, tall and polished with perfectly styled hair, wore attire that screamed affluence. Victor Grayson, she revealed, CEO of a competing startup I'd barely registered during my previous life. The revelation hit me with physical force, leaving me winded. I collapsed onto the couch, my eyes fixed on the photograph, desperately willing it to be a fabrication. Lila continued her exposition, her tone clinical and unwavering. She detailed how Victor's enterprise had strategically seized contracts my company had been pursuing after my incarceration. She revealed a substantial insurance settlement following the executive's death, with Victor's signature prominently featured throughout the documentation. Leaning forward, her gaze intensely focused on mine, she posed a haunting question. Had I ever questioned Serena's insistence on my working late that fateful night, the night they accused me of murder? I attempted to defend Serena, but the words dissolved before reaching my lips. Memories flooded back, her persistent reminders about an urgent project, that farewell kiss tinged with an unnaturally perfect smile. Before I could process these revelations, Kira emerged from the kitchen area, coffee cup in hand. Having stayed over following our conversation, she now stood evaluating Lila with barely concealed suspicion. Lila remained unfazed, pressing forward with her evidence. She produced another document, a bank statement revealing how Serena had emptied our shared account mere hours before my arrest. She described tracking Victor's movements, noting his suspicious appearances near our former residence, captured on surveillance cameras. My fingers curled into tight fists, nails biting into flesh. I protested weakly, insisting Serena despised such corporate types, always denouncing them as untrustworthy. Lila's skeptical expression spoke volumes, as she suggested this might have been another calculated deception. Kira's forceful placement of her mug shattered the mounting tension. Arms crossed, she confirmed Serena's talent for maintaining an innocent facade. She recounted witnessing Serena at the Rusty Anchor, accompanied by the same polished businessman, both exuding confidence months before my downfall. She mentioned Serena's practiced evasiveness when questioned about her evening activities. Though I wanted to defend my wife, to challenge their assertions, the mounting evidence was becoming impossible to ignore. The reality I'd known was crumbling, leaving me gasping for breath as I pushed away the damning documents, desperate for escape. Lila settled into the chair opposite me, her tone gentler than before. She explained her presence wasn't to deepen my wounds, but to uncover what really happened. She requested another meeting, suggesting I needed time to process and share my perspective. I managed a distant nod, barely registering her words as she left her business card and slipped away into the misty morning. Kira remained behind, her eyes studying me with anticipation of an imminent breakdown. When she finally broke the silence, her voice was steady and resolute, suggesting Serena had manipulated me from day one. She theorized that Serena's apparent disdain for Victor was calculated, preventing me from inviting him over and giving her freedom to orchestrate her schemes. I remained silent, my gaze fixed on the floor as my thoughts spiraled into chaos. Needing escape, I grabbed my jacket and fled the apartment. I found myself at a roadside diner, the kind where plastic tables never quite feel clean and weathered waitresses use terms of endearment freely. Nursing a cooling coffee, I forced myself to examine every interaction with Serena. Her melodic laughter, her tender caresses, her maternal moments with Caleb. Had it all been orchestrated? Each memory now felt tainted, like prodding an infected wound. Lila's photograph haunted me, Victor's possessive embrace around Serena seeming to mock everything I believed. Though resistance lingered, uncertainty was taking root, casting dark shadows over my certainties. I needed answers about Serena's actions, needed to locate her and Caleb. They were somewhere out there, along with the truth I was now compelled to pursue. My coffee grew cold, forgotten as Serena's image tormented me. That damning photograph with Victor Grayson contaminating every cherished memory. Unable to remain stationary any longer, I abandoned my barely touched drink, left a rumpled bill, and drove back to my Tacoma apartment. The rainfall had ceased, leaving the pavement glossy beneath the artificial glow of street lamps. Upon arrival, I found Lila waiting, propped against her vehicle with determination etched across her features. She announced she'd leveraged a connection to arrange a meeting with a potentially sympathetic police officer. My stomach twisted with apprehension. Though law enforcement had been responsible for my imprisonment, if Lila's suspicions about Serena proved accurate, I had limited alternatives. We drove to Portland, 2 hours down the interstate, pulling into a shabby motel with flickering neon signs and threadbare curtains that never quite met in the middle. Lila guided me to a second-floor corner unit where Detective Nolan Pierce waited. He was a burly man in his 50s, sporting a military-style haircut and wearing a tie that looked permanently attached to his collar. He introduced himself as one of the officers who'd arrested me years ago. My muscles coiled, ready for escape, but he raised his palm placatingly, explaining how Lila's father's investigation had forced him to question the original evidence. He expressed his desire to rectify past wrongs. Though skepticism lingered, I remained seated. Nolan outlined his strategy. He revealed that Jasper Tate, a small-time criminal in Victor's employ, had provided sworn testimony placing me at the murder scene. This scruffy delinquent, known for petty theft, had suddenly acquired unexplainable wealth. Nolan proposed rattling Jasper's cage, making him believe I was pursuing him, hoping he'd crack under pressure and expose Victor or Serena's involvement. The plan involved strategic appearances around town, creating an illusion of pursuit. Lila offered her network for surveillance, promising discretion. Despite my reservations about making myself visible, I recognized an action wasn't viable anymore. I agreed, my hands balled into fists beneath the table's surface. Kira arrived later, slipping through the door, clutching cheap whiskey, her expression troubled. She'd caught wind of Tanner discussing the strategy and voiced her disapproval. She argued that I'd barely tasted freedom before volunteering as bait. She insisted Jasper would crack without my personal involvement. I dismissed her concerns, explaining my need for answers about Serena's role. Resigned, she poured drinks and declared her intention to stay close, regardless of my preferences. Her unwavering loyalty was becoming endearing. Implementation began the following evening. I positioned myself outside a Portland dive bar, feigning interest in a cigarette while watching Jasper arrive in his weather Camaro. He now worked as a driver for questionable clientele, shuttling them between seedy establishments. I ensured our eyes met as he exited his vehicle, his complexion drained, fingers fumbling with his keys, providing me with dark satisfaction. Later, I strategically placed myself near the hotel, allowing another sighting as I lounged against my SUV with deliberate casualness. Nolan's surveillance team maintained their distance, blending with the shadows, but an unmistakable tension permeated the air. It struck without warning. I was traversing the parking lot toward the hotel, surrounded by exhaust fumes and the scent of rain-soaked asphalt, when blinding headlights blazed behind me. A dark Jeep emerged from an alley with a menacing growl, its tires shrieking as it barreled directly toward me. My pulse thundered in my ears. I launched myself over a nearby fence, crashing onto the ground as the Jeep clipped the curb before vanishing into the night. My shoulder erupted in pain, tiny stones embedding themselves in my palms, but I'd survived. Just barely. Kira sprinted over, her footsteps echoing against the pavement, and knelt beside me, her trembling hands examining me for injuries. She informed me I'd been unconscious briefly, and that law enforcement had lost the Jeep in the traffic flow. Lila materialized moments later, her expression tense with concern, declaring this confirmed our suspicions. I pushed myself upright, my vision swaying, tasting copper in my mouth. Nolan approached, muttering expletives, confirming Jasper had been under surveillance during the incident, eliminating him as the driver. That left either Victor or Serena, orchestrating events from the shadows. My hands quivered, not from terror, but fury. Someone wanted me eliminated, desperately enough to attempt twice. Kira steadied me as I stood, her grip unwavering, while Lila vowed to uncover the perpetrator. I acknowledged them, but internally I seethed. This had transcended beyond uncovering truth. It had become personal, and I wouldn't succumb without resistance. My injured shoulder pulsed as I eased into the SUV, watching the Portland hotel diminish in the mirror. The Jeep's near miss lingered in my mind, and Nolan's assurance about tracking it seemed empty, with Jasper still unaccounted for. Lila occupied the passenger seat, her fingers drumming against a evidence-filled folder, announcing a breakthrough. She revealed Victor owned a mountain retreat in the Cascades, connected to Serena's deceased aunt. My instincts flared at this revelation. Serena had frequently mentioned this sanctuary, her refuge during our disputes. If they were concealing themselves, that would be their location. I accelerated northward, the highway dissolving behind us as plans crystallized in the quiet. Kira refused to stay behind, positioning herself in the back with a tire iron she'd snatched from Tanner's establishment. Her voice remained composed as she declared she wouldn't let me confront this situation alone, though concern flickered in her penetrating gaze. When Nolan suggested calling for police assistance, I immediately vetoed the idea. The presence of law enforcement could endanger Caleb if Serena or Victor spotted them. I needed to assess the situation personally to understand who was manipulating events. The journey stretched for hours through thick pine forests and winding mountain roads, while the atmosphere grew increasingly sharp and rarefied. As twilight descended, we discovered a gravel path, with the cabin emerging against the craggy mountain backdrop. No illumination or chimney, smoke indicated life within. Though seemingly abandoned, something felt unsettling. I stationed the vehicle a quarter-mile away, instructing Lila and Kira to maintain their position while I investigated. Kira's fingers wrapped around my arm, warning me to remain vigilant, her touch lingering as if fearing my disappearance. I acknowledged her concern before slipping away, moving stealthily through the forest as pine needles crunched beneath my feet in the overwhelming silence. The cabin's entrance appeared decrepit, windows sealed with boards, but recent tire impressions marked the muddy ground. Someone had visited recently. I carefully pushed the door, its hinges protesting, and entered the darkened interior. Stale air reeked of decay and spirits. Then I noticed it, a boot extending from behind the sofa. My breathing faltered. Approaching cautiously, my heart racing. I discovered Victor Grayson's body, sprawled lifelessly, his vacant eyes staring upward, fresh blood seeping from a chest wound. Before I could comprehend the scene, wooden floorboards creaked behind me. I whirled as a figure attacked, something solid connecting with my head. Excruciating pain erupted before darkness consumed me. Consciousness returned to throbbing agony and my wrists secured to a chair with rope. Serena stood opposite me, maintaining her composure, wielding a firearm with an unfamiliar, cruel smile. She appeared transformed, more severe, her golden hair tightly bound and her eyes harboring malevolence. She revealed she'd anticipated my arrival, noting how I'd simplified her task. Despite my copper-tinged mouth, I managed to demand Caleb's whereabouts. Her laughter rang harsh and hollow as she disclosed his safety at an exclusive California boarding school, asserting I should relinquish my concerns about him. She moved methodically, her weapon unwavering, and began speaking as if reciting a well-practiced confession. She admitted to murdering the executive specifically to implicate me, conspiring with Victor to seize control of my company and collect the insurance payout. She described how she'd eliminated Victor too, right there on the cabin floor when he wavered in his resolve. My insides nodded as she detailed her calculated scheme, planting my fingerprints on the murder weapon, personally driving that Jeep in Portland while slouching to avoid detection. When I asked why, my voice unsteady, why not simply divorce me if she wanted freedom, she paused. Her gaze turned condescending as she explained it was never about emotional attachment. It was about acquiring wealth, influence, everything I'd established that she couldn't access while I lived. I struggled against the bindings, panic rising in my chest, when a sudden crack pierced the silence. Serena whirled toward the window, and I seized my chance, violently rocking the chair. It toppled, sending me crashing down as she spun back with the weapon. A gunshot thundered, splintering the wood inches from my head. Then the door exploded inward. Kira burst through, wielding a tire iron and letting out a warrior's cry. Serena fired again, missing wildly, and I managed to writhe loose from the loosening ropes. Lila stormed in, taking Serena down at the knees, sending the gun sliding across the floorboards. I scrambled for it, fingers trembling, but before I could reach it, a thunderous shot shattered the air. Nolan appeared in the doorframe, his service weapon smoking, and Serena collapsed, crimson spreading beneath her. Kira lowered her makeshift weapon, gasping for breath, while Lila worked to free me, her movements precise despite the mayhem. Nolan explained he'd followed our trail, anticipated my destination, said lethal force was his only option. I gazed at Serena's lifeless form, feeling an emptiness spread within. She'd stolen everything, my freedom, my faith, and now she lay dead. Though Caleb was protected, the price weighed heavily on my conscience. Darkness settled over the cabin, exposing harsh realities. The aftermath was suffocating, gun smoke and remorse hanging in the air. Serena remained motionless on the wooden floor, vacant eyes fixed upward, as Nolan secured his weapon, expression grim. Kira sagged against the wall, her tire iron forgotten, while Lila methodically cut through my remaining bonds. Despite my raw wrists and throbbing skull, thoughts of Caleb consumed me. According to Serena, he was safe at a boarding school in California. I held on to this truth like a beacon. Nolan spoke of handling the aftermath and local authorities, but his words barely registered. I stumbled outdoors, gulping crisp mountain air, desperate to escape the scene of bloodshed and deception. We departed swiftly, driving through the night toward Tacoma, headlights cutting through mist and forest darkness. Kira occupied the passenger seat, uncharacteristically silent, fidgeting with her jacket. Lila worked diligently in the back, documenting details to restore my reputation. I focused on driving, but my thoughts churned relentlessly. Serena's revelations haunted me, her calculated scheme for wealth and control. Images of Victor's murder flashed by, another pawn in her game, and I'd been the greatest fool, imprisoned while she manipulated our world. Each mile driven drove the painful truth deeper. At dawn, Tanner greeted us at the apartment, his expression somber though his grip remained resolute. He'd located Caleb at an elite private school near San Diego, a prestigious institution with ivy-draped walls and uniformed students. Without hesitation, I secured a flight, leaving Lila and Kira to finalize matters with Nolan. By midday, I touched down in California, where the intense sunlight and balmy air contrasted sharply with the Pacific Northwest's familiar coolness. The headmaster guided me to a secluded courtyard, and there stood my son, a decade old, kicking a soccer ball with that unmistakable frown I'd recognize anywhere. He stilled upon seeing me, eyes expanding in disbelief, before charging forward and colliding into me with an embrace that nearly toppled us both. He revealed Serena's cruel deception. She told him I'd perished in an automobile accident. The betrayal cut deep, but holding him close eased the ache. I vowed we'd begin anew, leaving the darkness behind. Back in Washington, events unfolded rapidly. The combination of Nolan's testimony, Lila's findings, and incriminating financial records Serena failed to conceal led to my exoneration. Jasper disappeared, likely fleeing prosecution or his conscience, but I remained indifferent. I secured a spacious residence on Seattle's periphery, featuring towering windows and meadow-like grounds dotted with wildflowers. Caleb thrived there, his joy echoing through the house as he darted across the lawn. Lila became a frequent visitor, bringing her spirited daughters whose gap-toothed smiles and instant bond with Caleb created a familial atmosphere. Kira claimed the guest room, exchanging bartending for childcare, her once frenetic energy transforming into steady reliability. Yet tranquility proved elusive. One evening, I discovered a document in Serena's old jacket, preserved in a box Tanner had recovered. It contained Swiss banking details and account numbers, a fortune amassed from Victor's illicit operations. Every dollar was tainted with deceit. Standing at the kitchen sink, I contemplated those figures, feeling the weight of possibility. The funds could finance a fresh start, but they felt toxic in my possession. Lila found me there, her presence casting a shadow across the counter. Without questioning, she placed a comforting hand on my shoulder, assuring me I needn't bear this burden alone. That evening, I incinerated the paper in the yard, watching flames consume Serena's final hold over me. I redirected the money to a foundation supporting children like Caleb, those who'd endured profound loss and found unprecedented peace in my rest. Life took root gradually after that. Lila and I developed a deeper connection, her understated resilience drawing me in unexpected ways. We'd share quiet moments on the porch, coffee mugs warming our hands, watching the children chase luminous fireflies as twilight descended over the rolling hills. Kira found romance with one of the investigating officers, a stern-faced detective who somehow matched her unpredictable nature. When Caleb inquired about Serena, his voice barely audible, I shared what truth I could, explained how she'd made devastating choices and faced their consequences. His silent understanding, reflected in eyes that mirrored my own resilience, spoke volumes. The aftermath of deception left deep scars. Serena's web of lies hadn't merely stolen my years. It had shattered a family and claimed lives. Victor's avarice transformed him into her unwitting pawn, ultimately leading to his demise by her hand. Jasper vanished into shadows of his own making, haunted by the consequences of his cowardice. I lost more than time, my trust, innocence, and years I couldn't reclaim. Yet the lesson resonated profoundly. Truth holds value, despite its pain. While bitterness chains you to the past, embracing forgiveness opens doors to genuine healing. I discovered strength in trusting those who proved worthy: Lila, Kira, Caleb, building a life more meaningful than what I'd lost. Today's story concludes here. Did this ending meet your expectations? Or did it catch you off guard? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this journey touched you, remember to like and subscribe for more storytelling adventures. Thank you for being part of this tale, and I'll see you in the next one.